Think about the last time you heard from someone who once shattered your world. Maybe it was a text, maybe a missed call. Maybe you just walked past them at a grocery store, and before your brain could even process what was happening, your chest tightened, your breath shortened, your stomach dropped. You told yourself you were over it. You told yourself you had healed, but your body just called you a liar. And here is what no one is telling you about that reaction. It is not weakness. It is not something therapy can fully undo. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting you, because your body has a memory that your mind cannot override. And once it labels someone as dangerous, that label does not come off, ever. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I am about to share with you is going to change the way you see forgiveness, reconciliation, and what it really means to protect yourself. Here's something that most people never talk about in conversations around toxic relationships. Your body keeps a biological record of every single person who has ever harmed you. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. When you go through a deeply painful experience with someone, your brain does not process it the way it processes normal memories. It encodes it into something called somatic memory, which is essentially a body-level imprint of the threat. Your nervous system, specifically the part governed by the amygdala, the threat detection center of the brain, creates a direct sensory association between that person and the feeling of danger, their voice, their smell, the way they walk into a room, the specific weight of their silence. All of it becomes a trigger. Researchers in trauma psychology have documented this response extensively, and what they consistently find is that the body reacts faster than conscious thought. Before you have even decided how you feel about seeing that person again, your cortisol is already spiking, your muscles are already tensing, your heart rate is already climbing. This is not something you can argue yourself out of, and this is the critical truth that the self-help world almost never admits to you, because the self-help world wants to sell you the idea that with enough work, with enough healing, with enough journaling and affirmations, you can eventually return to a clean slate with anyone. But biology does not work that way. In psychology, there is a concept called felt safety. It refers not to whether you are logically safe, but to whether your body genuinely registers safety in the presence of another person. Real intimacy. The kind that allows you to be fully open, fully vulnerable, fully yourself, can only exist when your nervous system is in a state of felt safety. Think about a person in your life right now who you genuinely feel relaxed around. Someone where you do not need to monitor your tone. Watch your words. Prepare for what comes next. Your shoulders are down. Your breathing is easy. You do not rehearse conversations before you have them. That is felt safety. Now think about someone who has seriously harmed you, emotionally, psychologically, or physically. Notice how different that feels in your body, even just imagining them. That difference is not something you created with your thoughts. It is something your body built as a protective architecture. And here is what matters. Once your nervous system designates someone as unsafe, it does not revoke that designation just because the person apologizes, just because time passes, just because they seem different now. The unsafe label is not a judgment. It is a biological survival mechanism, and your body will enforce it whether you want it to or not. A woman I will call Sarah, who reached out to me after watching a video on this channel, described exactly this experience. She had grown up with a mother who was emotionally unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes volatile, sometimes completely withdrawn. Sarah went through years of therapy, genuinely worked on herself, genuinely reached a place where she could talk about her childhood without breaking down. But every single time her mother called, she felt it. The tightening, the dread, the way her whole body just seemed to brace. She was not unhealed. She was not failing at forgiveness. Her body was simply doing its job. Here is the part that most people get catastrophically wrong. They believe that going back to someone who hurt them is proof of their own growth. It is not. Let me explain why. When you go back to someone who broke you, you do not re-enter that relationship as equals. You never can, because the moment the harm was done, an asymmetry was created between you. In every relationship, there is an invisible architecture of power when things are healthy. That architecture is balanced. Both people feel equally capable of walking away, equally safe expressing their needs, equally able to hold boundaries without fear of collapse. But once serious harm occurs, that balance is destroyed. And here is the dark part, the part that no one wants to say out loud. When you return after being hurt, you are not just giving someone another chance. You are sending them a message. The message is this: you can break me, and I will still come back. That is the signal your return communicates, not just consciously, but at the level of behavioral psychology and human beings, even without fully realizing it. Adapt their behavior based on the feedback they receive. If the feedback is that there are no real consequences for harm, that feedback registers. Dr. Lundy Bancroft, who spent decades working with abusive men, documented something consistent across thousands of cases. The factor that most reliably predicted whether harmful behavior would continue was not whether the person apologized, not whether they cried, not whether they went to therapy. It was whether the person who was harmed stayed or left. Because staying, regardless of what is said, communicates that the boundary is negotiable. Now, I need to address something that trips up even intelligent, self-aware people: the performance of change. When someone who has seriously harmed you understands that you are pulling away, most of them will change. Temporarily, they will be softer, more attentive, more careful with their words. They will apologize in ways that feel real. They will make promises that feel different this time. And here's why this is so dangerous: because it feels like evidence. It feels like proof that the relationship can be what you always wanted it to be. But what you're actually watching is strategic behavior, not genuine transformation. Genuine transformation in a human being is not something that happens in response to the threat of losing you. It is something that happens through sustained, often painful internal work over a long period of time, usually with professional help, and always independent of whether you are around or not. What you are watching when someone suddenly becomes the ideal version of themselves the moment you try to leave is damage control. It is a behavioral recalibration designed to stabilize the situation, to bring you back into the orbit where they have access to you. And once you are back, once the immediate threat of your departure has passed, the underlying patterns almost always reassert themselves, because the personality structure that produced the harm in the first place has not changed. People do not become fundamentally different people because they want to keep you. They become fundamentally different people because they do the work. And that work does not look like perfect behavior when they feel threatened. It looks like accountability in the absence of consequences. It looks like change when no one is watching. I want to challenge something that has caused an enormous amount of damage in the psychology and spirituality space. The idea that forgiveness requires reconnection. It does not. Forgiveness is an internal process. It is something you do inside yourself for your own liberation. It is the decision to stop letting the harm someone caused you continue to be the central organizing force of your life. It is releasing the weight of it, not for their sake, but for yours. But forgiveness does not require you to place yourself back in proximity to the thing that harmed you. You can fully forgive someone and never speak to them again. You can completely release the anger and grief and still maintain a boundary that protects your nervous system. These two things are not in conflict. Think about it this way. If you were badly burned by touching a hot stove, you could reach a place of total peace about that event. You could stop thinking about it, stop being defined by it, stop carrying bitterness about it, and you would still never deliberately touch that burner again. Not because you were still angry, but because you understand what it does to you. People who hurt you are not morally different from that stove. The boundary is not punishment. It is simply intelligence applied to what you now know. I know what some of you are thinking right now, because I hear this constantly. What about when it is your parents? What about when it is the father or mother of your children? What about when complete distance is not a real option? And I want to be honest with you about this, because giving you a clean, simple answer would be doing you a disservice. Sometimes full separation is not possible. Sometimes life requires that you maintain a functional relationship with someone who has hurt you. And in those cases, the answer is not pretending the harm did not happen. The answer is managing your level of psychological investment very carefully. You can fulfill obligations without offering intimacy. You can communicate about logistics without opening the door to emotional depth. You can be civil without being vulnerable. What you cannot do, what you must stop trying to do, is seek genuine emotional connection, understanding, or comfort from a person who has demonstrated that they are not safe with those things. Every time you go to them hoping for something real and come away feeling empty or worse than before, you are not failing to heal. You are simply expecting water from a well that does not have any. The well is not going to suddenly have water because you keep going back to it. And you need to stop measuring your recovery by whether or not that well eventually delivers. Here is what I want to leave you with. The most profound act of self-respect you can perform after someone has broken you is to take your own experience seriously. Not their apology, not their changed behavior, not their tears, not the version of them that shows up when they are afraid of losing you. Your own experience. Your body has already told you the truth about this person. It told you the moment you felt that tightening the last time you saw them. It told you every time you had to prepare yourself mentally just to answer their call. It told you every time you felt smaller, more confused, more exhausted after spending time with them. Your body does not lie. Your body does not hold grudges for fun. Your body is trying to protect the most important thing it has, you. Going back to someone who broke you and calling it forgiveness is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-betrayal that exists, because it disguises a wound as a virtue. It takes the damage done to you and frames it as your responsibility to undo by making yourself available for more. You deserve better than that. Not because someone told you so, not because a video on YouTube said so, but because the evidence of your own life has already proven it. If this landed differently than you expected, if something shifted, drop a number in the comments. 1 if you needed this today. 2 if someone specific came to mind. I read every single one.